A week, rightfully so, transitioned into a month, celebrating the collective power, resilience, and hard work of African Americans in this country. But is 1 month enough to note the value of their story, our story?
Black history is an opportunity for us to reflect, to celebrate, and be reminded of the power of the legacy that we brought to this country.
It allows us to pause and remember the greatness of those who have paved the way.
Black history is the American story, and probably the most significant part of the American story.
It's looking at what our ancestors have done before us and taking the torch and continue to pay it forward.
It's the things that give us the foundation of who we are as a very unique group of people.
Black history is abundance.
Black history shows you what we're capable of.
It was the innovative creativity of our ancestors who created America to have all of the major interventions. So when we look at elevators and ironing boards and many of the conveniences that we have over here in America, that's Black history.
Black history is also what we continue to do in modern day civilization.
Black history is something that I work and live every single day of my life.
It is a legacy before us, and it's also creating a legacy for those behind us.
Black history is empowering.
Black history is us.
Black history is now.
Black history is 365.
Carter G. Woods in 1926, when he established Negro History Week, was on the right track. He maintained that few people, black or white, knew enough about the achievements and contributions of blacks in American society. Woodson really was hoping that he could crack the door open to allow blacks to feel good about themselves. At one time, they would tell you that many blacks lacked self-esteem. Woodson was basically talking about group esteem, how to keep your group feeling good about themselves, how to allow them to have that pride in their heart, but progress on their mind. And that when other African Americans achieve, that not only they be greeted with applause on the side, but they be hugged, that they be an incorporate part of the whole experience. You do good, I do good. We share, we reciprocate our achievement and our contribution.
I mean, Black history, that's very important. I think it's important to honor it. I think it's important to make it. There's a lot of youth, especially black youth, that come from where I come from, the same environment, the same struggles, the same obstacles. And I think it's important to be a living, breathing testimony to people like Dr. Martin Luther King. You know, I like to say, like, I'm trying to still live the dream, but I'm also going through the nightmares as well. Malcolm X, you know, a lot of these prominent figures, and even some that's less notable. I like to take what they did, learn from it, and study the greats until they're not great anymore. So I guess in terms of Black history, like I said at the beginning, it's important to honor it and it's important to make it.
It's really important that I make contributions in my everyday life and every moment of every day to really pay tribute to those who came before me by investing in the generations of leaders who are coming up today. So I started an organization, One Village Alliance, and the goal is really to grow our youth into their true greatness through education, entrepreneurship in the arts, educating our children about who they really are, which they can only understand by knowing where they came from and the greatness that really paved the way before us.
As an artist, I feel like we contribute to Black history in so many ways just by creating. And that's what I do in my everyday life, I create. And you know, I create from a place that is a Black perspective. You look back and a lot of our culture comes from art, or it comes from music, you know, film, entertainment, you know, things like that. So to be able to contribute my voice it means so much, you know, to me and my family.
So one of the ways I contribute in my role as an adjunct professor in Africana Studies, I teach a film class. One of the things I do to contribute to my community is I teach our younger generation where this all started, specifically all of the trappings, all of the obstacles that it took for us to get to a point where we are remotely being seen as equal, as thespians, as artists, and so forth. It's important for our young people to get a history lesson to understand contextually how we got here and what are all the obstacles it took to get to this point.
In my role, largely what I do is a lot of community support. Community support around issues such as education, criminal justice, housing, and also the connection or liaison between state and local municipalities. I think if we can encourage people to just get involved in your community, that is Black leadership, and that is invaluable, and we can replicate that.
There's no presentations for this evening. We just needed to accept all the non-legislative business. I got into politics to make a difference, to speak up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. And even though we might be the majority population, our voice is the smallest heard. And so I want to make sure that in the, evolving and moving of Wilmington forward, that our voice is heard, that our needs are considered. There's a statement that if you're not at the table, you're part of the menu. So I wanted to make sure that whatever it is, foundation that I've made, I'm building it on those who've come before me, and that I'm making it better. And I make it so that it's simplistic, so that the individuals coming in, you don't have to redo or remake what I have been able to lay down and the ones before me have laid down, that a strong foundation for them to continue to build.
My mother was, she ran a community center when I was young, and so she had me around her constantly. And in that time, I seen her work with young people. She was a program director. And so she used to work with young people. These are people who come from impoverished communities, and she helped them a great deal. Some of them didn't have access to wash their clothes or didn't understand how to sustain a job. And so she really assisted them. And me being so young, when I just observed and watched the passion that she had, and I said to myself, I want to continue this work. That's why I think it's so important to pass on a legacy of competence to a young generation. And so it's me fulfilling my mother's prophecy, I guess, as you could say. And she really put me on a path and encouraged me to continue to help our people and realize that it's necessary.
It finally dawned on me what Woodson was trying to do. He spent his whole life trying to crack this door open that allowed for the achievements and contributions of Black to come forth.
It's not lost on me that I have stood on a lot of shoulders, from people that I knew personally to people I have never come in contact with, some of whom laid down their very lives that I can be in this particular position. So I think it's a responsibility that I own and care about in a real way, and have tried to use everything I've done regardless of where I was professionally. Jim Gilliam was a man who was as important in the halls of key decision-making, whether that be in the public or private sector, as he was in the grassroots community. I can't say enough about who he was to me personally and professionally. I mean, he really gave me an opportunity to be even in this position today. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that he was always brutally honest. And he was always of the mindset, we used to meet every Sunday, and I do meet every Sunday, that there were things I could work on spiritually, socially, emotionally, politically, that would help me be a better professional and a better man. So I can't thank him enough for that.
Yolanda McCoy has really changed my life, and I really think that she breathes and practices this Black excellence every day. From her family, from her personal views, from her in a political realm, I think that she's authentic, she's genuine, and she's the same Yolanda, I call her YOLO. She's the same YOLO behind closed doors and in front of people, and I love her spirit.
It would be, for me personally, Ida B. Wells. It's just an incredible story of overcoming obstacles, and this is a African-American woman, grew up family with slaves, and she becomes a school teacher and, ends up becoming an editor at a newspaper and owning her own newspaper and telling, famously the story of how African Americans are being lynched in the South. But she was a real activist, going over to England to let the people know, hey, you're buying cotton and this is what you're paying, this is what your money's doing, getting people lynched across the South, and then just she's a very inspirational figure because for an African American woman who is also a suffragist to be so loud in that period of time and be a founder of the NAACP is just mind-blowing. So I often think about her and other journalists from the past who helped me, I guess, put my little place in history into perspective on the days that I feel like it might be all pointless, which we all feel sometimes. But it helps you remember, hey, this is the job that I decided to do, and we're going to chronicle hip-hop culture every day, and that's just all there is to it.
My coach at Morehouse, Coach Lewis, we called him Junebug, born in Huntsville, Alabama, and dealt with some things, just one as a black man living in Alabama, in the 50s and 40s. And then obviously with him being a golf professional as well, the things that he dealt with on the golf course kind of really definitely deeply inspired me to, go down that direction and the path that I went. And, just hearing his stories, being on the van and talking to him, somebody that lived it.
When I think about Black history, I think about the history makers that are living today. Not only our kids and young people who inspire us every day, but people like Dr. Vilma Scanterbury, who is the very first African-American female transplant surgeon. And she's right here in Delaware. She's doing her thing. And she really inspires me when I hear people talking about, well, women of color are not in STEM and technology and using the sciences. And here's a woman right here that's using science and her background as a doctor to save lives and impact the world and inspire generations of young women and girls, including myself.
I have always had that desire to be a physician, and when I finally arrived in medical school, I have to say that my exposure to anatomy and the body just sort of inspired me to be a surgeon, and that's what I wanted to be. Initially, the first female surgeon I met was a pediatric surgeon, and I wanted to be just like her, and that was my goal. And along the way, I was exposed to transplantation surgery, and I sort of merged the two in terms of being able to operate on kids and adults and also do transplants. So that's how I ended up being the first in my field as an African-American transplant surgeon.
All together, we are here, we are here, and we're gonna do this thing, right?
Lisa Blunt Rochester. I've just known Lisa personally, and I know the trials and tribulations that she's gone through. And even when life was difficult for her, she didn't think about self. She thought about doing something for everybody else in the state of Delaware, to go out there and speak on their behalf. That right there is courage, that is love, and she does it so well, and she does it so gently, and she does it so convincing.
When I first ran for office and actually became Delaware's first woman and first African American to serve in Congress, a lot of people would ask me this question: what does it feel like to make history? And I always had a hard time with that because I never really thought about the history making part of it. And maybe part of that is because I know that there are so many people who aren't in the history books, but history wouldn't have been made had they not been on this planet. Everybody from like the school teachers that helped me to my grandmothers who, just were such inspirations for me. I think of all of these people like that their names weren't necessarily in the history book in school, but they're in the history book of my family and your family and that community.
My mother, she's Black history. She's actually just did 25 years at Delaware State University. She worked her tail off, her career. She was also coming up, she was into her arts. She had to sacrifice for me. We moved from DC at a very young age, and we moved from the projects. I'm just honored to be here. I'm honored to live her legacy, you know. Black women played a heavy role. Whoever said they couldn't raise a man, they lied.
I was adopted when I was 2 months old. My mom rescued me from an orphanage. She wasn't able to have children herself, so she raised me up until this point. She's absolutely the leader in my life.
I cannot begin to talk about leadership without acknowledging my fierce mother, who took it upon herself, knowing that I wanted to be a doctor, to uproot her family in Barbados and come to the United States in order to provide us, and provide me in particular, a better opportunity to go to medical school and to pursue my dreams. And I have to really look back and think that was difficult for her. She was a mother of 7 kids, being able to say, this is what I want to do and this is what I want from my family. And she was there behind me, as well as my dad, 100%. I think my determination and my willingness to pursue and my stubbornness comes from her, and I appreciate that tremendously.
Woodson was a diehard when it came to African American history, and he did not want Black History Month now to be used as propaganda. He believed the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about Black history should exist. And Woodson said we have to reject that feel-good history. We have to accept that, let the romance and sentiment go. What is the truth about the matter?
I'm down with Black History Month and the energy and how it's helping to promote us, even preserve us. But I really want people to know the other side. You know, I want you to know that there's no history that doesn't start without us, and that we need to expand upon things as far as what we describe ourselves. So that's going to make us actually have to look really deep into ourselves and honor the oral tradition that we have in our families. Like, we laugh when people are like, oh, you have Indian in your family. Why are we laughing at that? That's a serious matter. That is paper genocide. You know, let's talk about that in so-called Black history. Like, so it's cool, yeah, we have Martin Luther King Day and all of those types of things, but I would like to spend more energy on making sure that we actually uplift ourselves, and uplift ourselves in a way that we're not dissing each other and we're not dissing other people and other races. And we need to have the dignity, we need to have the respect, and we have the honor. Maybe we would take care of ourselves better. Maybe we would take care of the East Side better. Maybe we would take care of the West Side better. If we didn't think that we came over here on some ships, if we knew that this was the land of our ancestors, that this is where we come from, this is where our blood is at, and actually think that we should stop taking rations, like take Black History Month, take Women's History Month. Like, you know, we give thanks for these things, but I think, you know, it's just not enough. It's just not enough, and I really wish that we could get rid of it.
We live in a society now that is full of self-serving. This self-serving is difficult. We have to continue to reciprocate and share with one another. Share one's hard times with one's high times. The result being that you can begin to reflect that in order to get to the next step, you might have to go through this and that.
The crab in a barrel scenario just comes from everybody wanting to be great, but not being comfortable enough with themselves to understand that there will be people that will surpass you and that will get higher up in life and maybe even achieve the same goals that you want. But you have to be comfortable in yourself and have enough perseverance and motivation to say, okay, well, you're climbing, I'm climbing too. And then everybody gets to the top. And I think that when you talk about neighborhood and community, it comes back down to those foundation lessons that you learned. Just being in your community, saying, okay, well, if I help my neighbor to be better, eventually they'll help me to be better, or they'll help someone else. So it's kind of like in each one teach one. Not that crabs in a barrel isn't a very real scenario that we all have seen or went through, but it's just something to get past, as all Black people do. Life is constant struggle for us, and different situations will bring that about, so we all have to figure out how to get past it.
You can't just hold your successes to yourself. You got to be able to do it in word and deed, and you got to be able to do it as much and as impactfully as you're doing it sort of when you're putting on a tie, as when you're just chilling at home.
Other cultures say when they go into a business, this is our family business. But in a Black culture, we don't say this is a family business. We don't bring our kids to work. And if we do bring our kids to work, they're like, why they got that kid at work? If you go to any other restaurant, you go to a Chinese store, kid is 12 years old in the register. We need to do that for our adolescents, our children, our families, our cousins. When they're 12 years old, 13, we bring you in. Bring them in when they're younger. You know what I mean? Build those roads for them to travel so they see it. I always say, nobody taught me how to be a businessman. That's why a lot of Black businesses fail or we struggle, because nobody really taught us how to have a Black business. I'm gonna talk about it. Like, no, I struggled. It's things, but I wasn't taught that. So now it's my job to teach other Black businesses coming up, okay, this is some things you're gonna come across.
I love this one quote, and it says, if everyone swept in front of their doorstep, the whole world will be clean. So if you take that into effect, and if everyone had 10 people that they influenced or did positive things for, and they can look at that person and say, I want to be like him. I think that if it's 1,000 of us and if we all influence 20 people, that's 20,000 people. So I think the goal is, it has to be a plethora of us.
I think it's important for us to support one another and to recognize that we are family. I think that's real important, and I think we have really gotten away from that because of our oppression. And so I think that this year, especially, there's a groundswell of energy around supporting Black-owned businesses and recognizing our cultural identity. So in order for us to move forward and to progress as a people, we have to recognize that it's up to us to step up and to set the tone for the next generation. And that means working collectively so the next generation doesn't have to inherit some of the mishaps of former generations.
We know that February is merely a kickoff month. It's a time to kick it off, that Blacks have made contributions all throughout the year, the decades, etc. But February is critical to Black Americans because with this personal sense and then this group sense, there needs to be some time in which they can feel that this is the time for us to really push. So February, I call it the kickoff date for Blacks to maintain and continue their sense of group esteem.
Black history is vital to every group of people because it's our contribution to the world, not just this country and not just to each other.
Black history is building roads so others can travel them.
Black history is legacy.
Black history is hope, faith, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
Black history is deep like the melanin that we come from, that is the absolute within.
Black history is a lived experience. We are creating Black history at this very moment.
Black history is endless.
Black history continues to pave the way for history makers like me today.
Black history is Black excellence.
Black history is American history.
Black history is